Aldo grew up in Nazi Germany, and that had a huge impact on how he thought about what our mission was. Why are we here? What are we here to do? And kept reminding everyone that the purpose of our program is to help children with heart defects. It's not to glorify our careers. It's not to bring a lot of revenue to the program. It's really to help children who otherwise have no other options.
Bill and Aldo worked together for very long years. It started at the University of Minnesota with Lillehei and Varco, two key pioneers in cardiac surgery. The department in Minneapolis was at this time the most influential and innovative center in the world. Aldo was already professor, and Bill, 10 years younger, came as a resident. Bill acquired there a comprehensive knowledge of the physiology of the circulation, which was central for the surgery of hypoplastic left heart syndrome that he developed later. Also, Aldo was inspired by the creativity and courage of Dr. Lillehei, qualities that has conducted Aldo's whole professional career. Then Aldo, a citizen of Guatemala, was named chief of the most prestigious department of pediatric cardiac surgery at the Boston Children's Hospital at Harvard University.
Aldo arrived in Boston as chief of cardiac surgery at Boston Children's in 1972 at the incredibly young age of 42. I was a third-year Harvard medical student. Later, when I spent 6 months on his service as chief resident in 1979, it was the pre-arterial switch era, and during the initial foray into the surgical treatment of hypoplastic left heart syndrome by Bill Norwood, the environment was really magnificent for students, residents, fellows. We had continuous interactions with cardiology fellows and faculty, immersion in anatomic specimens with Richard and Sullivan Prague, and of course, operating with Bill Norwood and Aldo. But you know, there was always clarity that Aldo was the real maestro who made it all work. He was elegant, intelligent, kind, and really loved by everyone. And his way of operating was elegant, simple, and masterful. It was truly a joy to be with him in the operating room. He appreciated a good assistant and was in turn a great surgical mentor. Bill Norwood, though very early in his career, was obviously an extremely gifted surgeon whose mind was always churning with innovative ideas. The opportunity to train with both of these visionary and virtuoso surgeons was an amazing experience. Certainly, Bill Norwood will be forever linked with his eponymous pioneering work with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, and Aldo Castaneda will always be remembered as the most respected proponent of routine, early primary repair of many complex cardiac malformations. But during the daily routine of caring for all of these complex babies, he was a joy to be around and a constant inspiration. Yes, an amazing man who will be remembered as one of the truly elite leaders in this field.
With the contact of all the other fantastic team of other colleagues in this hospital, influenced me very much since I decided to become, at that time, a pediatric cardiac surgeon. And I continued after my time of fellowship, repeated visits and stays in Boston, where we were at that time stimulated by the Castaneda doctrine that was going to corrective surgery on all kids, symptomatic all kids when it was possible, instead of temporary surgery. But during my career, he inspired me by other characteristics of his behavior. Now, in the operating room, he was always calm, with kindness for everybody. In the meetings with the other colleagues, he inspired a real collaborative spirit of team, you see, very accessible for discussion. And one particular thing was his self-criticism.
I was with Dr. Castaneda in the mid-1980s as a senior and chief resident. Unfortunately, I came only 6 months after Dr. Norwood had left for Philadelphia, and therefore I can only talk about Dr. Castaneda, the gentleman, scientist, artist, teacher, and friend. And artist in this role stands for surgeon. This is how he saw pediatric cardiac surgery. Talking about Dr. Castaneda means you have to dress up, you know, as we had to do for rounds if we were not in scrubs. With a tie, I repeatedly, without a tie, I was repeatedly greeted by him like, Gerhard, you're looking like a plumber. Don't you have real clothes to wear? So, well, we tried our best, and obviously today it has to be the same.
I had the opportunity to work with both Bill and Aldo early in my career. I arrived as a foreign medical graduate from Australia and New Zealand in 1983 at Boston Children's, and worked as a resident during that amazing year when Aldo and Bill pioneered the arterial switch operation. And of course, Bill Nord had just published the Nord procedure in the New England Journal, the first time that a successful operation for hypoplastic left heart syndrome had been described. So it was really an amazing year to work with the two of them. They were really a yin and yang. Aldo Castaneda had a tailor in Rome. He was always impeccably dressed. He spent a lot of time talking with families and nurses and the residents. Bill was a real yang to Aldo's yin. He was usually in surgical scrubs, and he was a difficult man to extract information from for all of us. But he was unique in that he had different approaches, and the whole idea of the Nord operation was really revolutionary for its time.
I had the privilege also to get involved in some research after my formal training, finished in 1983, and with Dr. Norwood at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where I was able to learn even more related to the biophysics and the interplay that were taken in account of the disease, the patient, the surgery, and the, well, not to say the well-being of those patients. Later in life, both joined again in 1993 in Lenoir, Switzerland, and finally to return to the States, in the case of Norwood, and Dr. Castaneda to take another paramount challenge to give his country, Guatemala, which is very close to mine, the opportunity to have a pediatric cardiac center of the same standards and even more compared to the developed countries.
Well, I met Dr. Aldo Castaneda and Dr. Bill Norwood around 1992, 1993 in Genolier, Switzerland, where they came to open a world center for pediatric cardiac surgery. And I was very honored to join them and start learning with them. In my very beginning, I was in my last residency years in Switzerland. I was training there in Zurich. And from the beginning, what strikes me out from Aldo Castaneda, when I just met him, he walked with me in the operating room and told me, I'm not going to do the surgery today, but Bill is doing the surgery. He's going to operate on the aortic left ventricular tunnel, which is quite rare to see in congenital heart disease. And he said, well, you can put my shoes, as you know, surgeons have special shoes in the operating room to go in. And he offered me put my shoes and go in and see the surgery from Bill Norwood. And that for me was incredible, because in Europe, the hierarchic way to work, professors are like gods. And when someone like God, like Aldo Castaneda said, well, put my shoes and you can walk in the OR, I was struck. What a humble person, what an incredible person was from the beginning. And then I went to finish my fellowship training with Bill Norwood to the States. Working with Bill Norwood was incredible because he was very intense and an incredible teacher, but very, very hard as a surgeon. He was not easy to work with, but incredible to learn with because he was so gifted. He could do surgeries in the fastest time, ambidextrous and incredible. And the meantime that he was doing the surgery, he will ask you so many things about the surgery. And if you were able to answer all the questions that he made, he will then go to mathematics, physics, and general questions, and put you always to think. That was amazing for him. One day he gave me in one of the operating towels a problem in mathematics of infinite numbers that the physics in the experimental station from DuPont took hours to resolve. And he will resolve it in 5 minutes. He was incredible. And I have the best memories and the best training that I can remember from him. After finishing my training at AI DuPont in Delaware, Aldo Castañeda asked me to join him to help him to develop the program in Guatemala. He was alone there, and he was doing again surgery. He was retired initially, but he saw that nobody was doing pediatric cardiac surgery in Guatemala or in Central America, so he decided to go back, but he was alone. So he asked me to join him, and that was, again, an honor for me. I got a Jeep and drove from Pennsylvania down to Guatemala. Initially, it was supposed to be for 1 year, and I stayed for 12 years with Aldo Castañeda there. And I was very honored to become the chief surgeon from his team. And Aldo Castañeda was amazing, a gentleman, always there for you. Even if you were doing surgery at 3 o'clock in the morning, he would come to the hospital and help you out if you have any troubles. So I have the best teachers that I can thank God for this incredible training.
I've been a former trainee of Dr. Castañeda, and I worked with him since 2009 to 2010. I worked with him a year and a half as part of my international training during my residency. And he teach me a lot of aspects in medicine, but most importantly, he touched my personal beliefs about how to be a surgeon, how to be a good doctor, and how to be a researcher and a teacher. And he gave me all of these lessons with great humility, because he was a humble person. I remember the first day I met, I was very nervous about meeting such a giant of cardiac surgery. And he called me in his office after one day I was arrived in Guatemala. And I sit almost shaking in front of him, and I call him Professor Castañeda, and say it was extremely honored to meet him and to know him in person. And he stopped me right away and says, please don't call me professor, call me Aldo, because I'm your colleague, I'm a doctor like you, and we should call each other by name. And this humility and the kind way he told me this gave me immediately a shock about how to be a good teacher and a good person, and the fact that despite being such a giant of our field, the respect was not coming from a name or a word placed in front of his surname, but the way he acted every day.
Aldo, the old one, it was what we call today a keen emotional intelligence. At that time, we didn't know that this was emotional intelligence. And he was able to handle groups of talented people, like it could be the Children's Hospital of Boston in that era. And he was doing this with an intelligence that he made him almost an experienced orchestra conductor. He was doing like if everybody was important for him, everybody. Even the last one came the day before. And he was also lucky because he knew many languages. He was Spanish, but Spanish is a major language. Then he was spoke very well Italian, German, French, a lot of languages, and this helped him very much. On the other hand, Bill he was a naturally talented innovator, spontaneous. He would always tell, not continue to do things just because we have always done this way. Every day, ask yourself if you can do it better than yesterday.
When history judges the enormous scope of Dr. Norwood's work and its ultimate impact on nearly every aspect of our specialty, he stands on rare earth, and this is a metaphor that I think Bill would have especially liked. The Norwood legacy has been, at least in part, responsible for the success of each of the many excellent pediatric cardiothoracic surgeons in the EACTS today. Many younger surgeons attending this session were not even working in the specialty during the early days of the Norwood operation. And at the time, hypoplastic left heart syndrome was poorly understood. Many excellent surgical teams of that era were humbled by the poor outcome of surgical treatment, and support from colleagues and institutions was often lacking. So, concerned but undaunted, Bill Norwood kept his intense focus on problems relating to pre, intra, and postoperative management of hypoplastic left heart syndrome patients. And he eventually demonstrated that his three-stage approach constituted a viable solution for many neonates who were indeed facing 100% mortality if left untreated.
My career, like the one of many other pediatric cardiosurgeons who had the great opportunity of working with him, has been influenced tremendously by his attitude towards innovation and his determination in achieving goals which seemed unimaginable to many of us at that time. On my return back to Italy in 1988, I performed successfully my first Norwood operation. I was discouraged by several failures which followed afterwards. Nevertheless, I persevered, knowing that Bill had already opened the road for us.
Dr. Norwood, of course, had worked with Dr. Castaneda, and they were certainly complementary, but in many ways they were remarkably different. But the difference actually, I think, probably strengthened them, and together they established Boston, of course, as one of the greatest units in the world, and set a standard that has been maintained. And that in itself is an achievement, because it is not unknown for a unit to achieve considerable status worldwide. This is true in many aspects of life. Football clubs and so on with a great coach may rise to eminence and then fade when that person disappears. But the real mark of excellence is to set a standard that is maintained, and that they have done.
The impact of Aldo and Bill on my personal practice and say even life, their legacy, as far as I'm concerned, can be ultimately expressed in one sentence by Aldo, which is surgery is essentially a moral act. And their example stems from this sentence, and is for me a daily inspiration for transparency, balance, judgment, commitment, erudition, innovation, courage, compassion, and empathy towards the patients and the families.